I know what you might be thinking from the title. This is nothing more than a clickbait video designed to stoke controversy for views, but please hear me out. With the Game Pass library now containing Bethesda and Activision titles, I couldn't help but wonder why the pricing model has barely budged. With Microsoft spending $67 billion USD on the Activision Blizzard purchase, something didn't seem right to me, and really, that's where this video began. It's not to attack Game Pass subscribers or call them out. This is merely my thoughts in video form. If you disagree, by all means, make your own video. Last thing before we begin, I chose Skyrim as the background footage based on my need for a Game Pass title, and I really wanted to play Skyrim. Firstly, I loved Game Pass. No one can say that Game Pass isn't amazingly good value for money. Having access to such an enormous library of titles from small indie games to AAA monsters, not to mention having access to Xbox first-party titles on day one. And now with Bethesda and Activision Blizzard belonging to Microsoft, the ability to play some of the biggest IPs in the industry for only 16 AUD a month, it's almost too good to be true. As of January 18th, 2022, Microsoft reported 25 million Game Pass subscribers, which was up from the 18 million subscribers in January 2021. With the current figures, that's roughly $4.8 billion in revenue per year. So with numbers like that, why am I making a video about the potential failure of Game Pass? Right now, if you were to purchase Game Pass Ultimate, it would cost 16 AUD per month, or roughly $192 per year. That's really good. But what happens when the price increases? Like every subscription-based service, it's inevitable that the price will increase, but it all has to do with the amount it increases by. If Xbox followed the same path as Netflix, then it's safe to surmise that the price would rise by roughly 10% per year. Therefore, in 5 years' time, the cost of Game Pass would be $26 per month, or 312 AUD per year. That's purely speculation though. So far, even at the speculative $312 per year, it's still fairly decent value for money. But ask yourself, how many of those games will you be playing? As someone who recently cancelled their Game Pass subscription based purely on the limited amount of time I have to play per week, it mattered very little how many games were available to me, but rather what games would give me the best experience. Now, $4 a week is roughly the same price as my double espresso, but if the coffee was bad, I'd be disappointed with that $4 purchase. Similarly, if I'm not getting anything out of the games I play, regardless of how cheap the cost is, then what's the point? Towards the end, I was only holding on to Game Pass just in case I needed a game to play in between the next big release. Outside of that, Game Pass was meaningless to me. And I'm sure many of you feel the same. For now, let's break down that $192 a year entry fee. In Australia, depending on where you shop, you could nab 2 AAA releases per year with $30-ish to spare. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, does it? But when we factor in that many players may have a PlayStation Plus subscription or an Xbox Gold Pass, while PC players might have an Epic Games account just to claim those free games, and some still only purchase games when they're on sale, well, suddenly that $192 a year, it's going a long way. You might also have a backlog of games to play, and when we also consider birthdays and if you celebrate Christmas, then suddenly you have quite a few opportunities to pick up some new games, not to mention purchasing pre-owned titles from EB, Gumtree, G2A, or simply borrowing games from your mates. The main point I'm trying to hammer home is that the $192 per year you save without Game Pass goes a lot further than you may think, not including using that money to pay bills or other necessities of daily living. Considering all that, first you need to think about how much time per week do you have to play video games. Your situation will be different to mine. I currently work a full-time job that's around 40 hours per week. I have family commitments, my own personal hobbies, including growing this channel. So I have to manage my time carefully. And on average, I have around 8 to 10 hours per week to play games for my leisure. That's not including any live streams or games for this channel. All in all, that's not an inconsiderable amount of time to enjoy the art of video games. But that all depends on what games you enjoy playing. For me, I love RPGs, games that can take up to 40 to 50 hours to complete and fully enjoy. Persona 5 is a game I sunk 200 hours into. Granted, that was a long time ago. Regardless, it's my favorite video game series and I loved every minute of those 200 hours. But now, if I were to take that same 200 hours and divide it by the amount of time I currently have to play, it would take me roughly 4 months to experience one of my favorite games. In fact, right now I'm playing through Persona 5 Strikers and I still haven't finished it. I'm only 30 hours in and it's almost been 6 weeks. Time is very important to us all, and the older you get, the more that time becomes increasingly precious, to the point that you might have less than 10 hours to play per week. Maybe it's your career or you have a child, but soon, video games will take a less prominent place in your life. And just like that, those 2, maybe 3 or 4 games per year you purchase will go quite a long way. Especially with multiplayer games, free-to-play, or titles that have massive amounts of replayability, such as Elden Ring or Skyrim. Obviously, there's another side of the coin too. Maybe you're a YouTuber, or perhaps you don't work at all. You might be a crypto millionaire, and not only do you have more time up your sleeve, but that $200 a year is nothing but a drop in the ocean. You are in the minority though. The next issue that Game Pass faces is overchoice. The concept of overchoice was first introduced to the modern vernacular by Alvin Toffia in the 1970s, and despite his methods being difficult to reproduce, it's hard to deny that we have all felt the burden of overchoice in our lives. Imagine being at a nice restaurant and staring down at a menu that's filled with amazing and delicious dishes, but there's too many to choose from. So you end up sticking to something that's familiar, something you've had before, something you know you'll enjoy. That's the ultimate flaw with Game Pass. It's certainly the feeling I faced on multiple occasions. There were so many choices that I ended up playing games I'd like and barely looked at games outside my comfort zone. There's also the paradox of choice, where too many options limits the choices you make. And since you haven't invested a portion of your income into a single product, that connection to it isn't there, and you're not obliged to get your money's worth or even research a game before buying. The moment you're not enjoying a game or you begin to find it difficult, you can simply uninstall and pick another title from the many dozens waiting for you. And that's a big issue. At first it seems great. You never have to worry about making a bad decision again, but that takes away a large portion of the non-conscious enjoyment we get from playing games we love. And once you start pulling at that thread, the whole system unravels and suddenly Game Pass becomes less appealing. Your experience may be different, as I'm only sharing my own opinion through my own experiences. I love the research and decision-making process when I purchase a new game, even if it sometimes doesn't work out. Don't get me wrong, I played some great games on Game Pass, but factoring in the limited amount of time I have to play, combined with that constant thought that I could replace the game without a moment wasted, well, it left me thinking of those games I've played before and wanting to play them instead. Social scientist Barry Schwartz, in his books The Paradox of Choice, discusses the burden of overchoice and the inevitable feeling of regret when we waste time browsing dozens upon dozens of products only to settle on something familiar. He elaborates and highlights the decision-making process when making a choice. We weigh up the positives and the negatives and formulate a decision based on those parameters. The products carry more value because we were invested in the decision-making process. But by introducing overchoice and combining that with little repercussions for our choices, then the reward of the decision-making process no longer exists, and our non-conscious connection to the game, it just isn't there. Think of the last time you purchased a game. You saved money for it, watched your favorite reviewers, and then it lets you down. It's not nearly as good as you'd hoped. You would certainly feel regret, and perhaps you'd trade it in for something better. Game Pass does eliminate this because of the abundance of titles at your fingertips. It removes buyer's remorse and allows you to simply find a replacement. However, now imagine you find that perfect game. You love it. You want to invest dozens and dozens of hours into it. You feel incredibly satisfied with your research, with all those steps paying dividends. That emotional connection to the game is galvanized and your enjoyment multiplied. And yes, Game Pass can give you that same experience, but if that one game will give you dozens of hours of new gameplay, new experiences, and you only have a limited amount of time to play, then what's the point of having hundreds of games available at any one time? FOMO naturally plays a big part in this. Microsoft has designed it into the very core of Game Pass. Don't believe me? Well, by absorbing Bethesda and Activision Blizzard, it shows that the very foundation of Game Pass is built on a castle of sand, constantly needing to induce FOMO to increase the subscriber count. Do you want to play Elder Scrolls 6? Get Game Pass. Do you want to play Diablo 4? Come, get Game Pass. It just works. This goes for any subscription-based service. It's the reason why Netflix cranks out so many new shows and movies. It's to increase those subscriber numbers, and more importantly, it's to keep the subscribers around. And yet, they continue to increase the price year on year. Something Game Pass will have to do, no matter how many studios they conquer. Now, this last section of the video is pure speculation, and it's going to be on the potential price model for Xbox Game Pass. It's more of a thought experiment rather than a demonstration of gathered evidence. One option for Game Pass is a tiered model approach. We actually have that already, with Game Pass Ultimate including the ability to play games over the Xbox Cloud service, while the basic pricing model removes this feature. What I think will change is how much it will cost to access certain games. With Microsoft acquiring some of the biggest studios in the industry, it's no surprise that they'll want to charge gamers access to some of the biggest IPs around. Personally, I don't see how Xbox can feasibly keep giving players access to upcoming games like Diablo 4 or Starfield while only charging 16 AUD. What I see happening is Microsoft giving us the choice for cloud gaming and client-based gaming, but then having the options within. One tier allowing us to access the already massive library, but omitting first-party games and day one releases, while the second tier, the more expensive tier, will give us full access. It might look something like this. Again, this is all speculation, and yet I can't help but think that these recent acquisitions by Microsoft is a way to induce FOMO and get people hooked. Combined with the currently insanely cheap pricing model, it all smells of suspicious business tactics. This isn't an attack on Xbox Game Pass. It is, after all, a spectacular service for the price of entry. I merely find recent events interesting, and if it wasn't for these acquisitions, I wouldn't have thought any more about it. But Microsoft has clearly crunched their numbers, and I wonder if they project a potential significant loss in subscribers within the near future, with the Activision Blizzard purchase a way to mitigate any of these future losses. I'm also not attacking Game Pass subscribers. If you enjoy Game Pass, you're allowed to. But I'm also allowed to think critically of it, and free to think on the potential sinister underbelly of Xbox Game Pass. In our ever overstimulated and over-monetized industry, services such as Game Pass stand out for its generosity, and yet one can't help but be skeptical, with Phil Spencer simultaneously touting his good guy stance for the gaming space, while also starting a buying war for gaming studios. Microsoft is a business at the end of it all and will do anything it can to secure a majority of control of the playing audience, even at the cost of the industry itself. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like or a comment below, or feel free to subscribe. I also upload to Odyssey, and I'd love to see you there or have a chat with me on Twitter. Until next time, see you later and take care.